The next piece is documenting upfront how effective this hedging instrument is going to be against the hedged item. So we have to document effectiveness. So we're going to do a little bit of statistics. So when we think about a risk that's being hedged, we want to mitigate that risk. So we're talking about effectiveness. So here's my hedged item, my hedged risk, whatever that is, and here's my hedging instrument. Okay? And we've gone through the literature, and we made sure that the hedge risk is allowable, and this is a derivative. So if I am mitigating the volatility of my hedged risk with the hedging instrument, if the value of my hedged risk, goes up, what should happen to the value of my hedging instrument? If I am hedging off this risk, then the hedging instrument, the value of the hedging instrument, should go down. If the value of the hedge risk goes down, then the value of the hedging instrument should go up. So this is what I'm looking for. And now I've got to evaluate how effective this is. So if I want this to be perfectly effective, perfect effectiveness. Perfect effectiveness. When this goes up or down by $1, if this changes by $1, how much should the, and we're looking for perfect effectiveness, how much should the hedging instrument change? The hedging instrument, if this is perfectly effective, if this goes up $1, then the hedging instrument should also change by $1, going obviously in the opposite direction. That's perfect effectiveness. If we go back to some of our old statistics, let's brush some of that off, and we bring up the idea of a correlation coefficient. I may have spelt that wrong. I think there might be two F's. What is the correlation coefficient of this perfect effectiveness? This goes up, this goes down, this goes down, this goes up by exactly the same amount. The correlation coefficient for a perfectly effective hedge should be -1. Okay? If you can brush off your old statistics knowledge. That is perfectly effective. So how much latitude do I have away from -1? Is it, what is it, plus or minus how much? That is a judgment call. Now you'll see in the book, and you'll see in maybe some of the applications, and listening to different organizations, they might just well tell you that this is got to be a correlation coefficient, if you will, or a relationship. You know, you probably can't go below a -0.8. Right? That's probably the extent that you could go as far as your correlation coefficient, right? The reciprocal of this, if we think about the reciprocal, is 1.25. So if we're just looking at the relationship of one movement over the other, depending on which one you put on top, 0.8 to 1.25. So basically, we're looking at a correlation coefficient. Can't really be below 0.8. So it's 0.79. Is that ineffective? 0.78. Remember, this is guidance. It's still going to require your judgment call to see whether or not you believe it's effective. Oh, and by the way, effectiveness has to be measured two different ways. Effectiveness has to be measured both on a prospective and retrospective basis. Okay? Retrospective and prospective bases. So what is the retrospective basis? Well, just like we did here, we compare in the past, we compare how the hedge risk changed as far as value is concerned versus the hedging instrument. And we look at how much the hedging instrument offsets the hedged risk. So the retrospective method is called the cumulative dollar offset. Okay? Used across a large number of organizations. So for a retrospective method, the cumulative dollar offset, where we look at how much did the hedging instrument offset the change in the hedged risk. For a prospective method, we can use prior historical market data to predict how well this relationship will work in the future. So we can use some kind of a regression model to predict effectiveness. So, in my judgment call, if the cumulative dollar offset method is at 0.75 or 0.6 or 0.5, well, I can still look to my prospective method, and maybe there's some evidence there that, yeah, it may not have worked this past period using the retrospective method, but prospectively it still looks like it's going to work. If both of these models both point to the relationship between the hedged item and the hedging instrument not being effective, then you may have to stop hedge accounting.